Hey everyone, I am reporting to you from out in front of the European Parliament. I'm going to be talking to you about something that is definitely going to impact the United States, is going to impact citizens around the world. If you're an American, if you're a Canadian, if you're an Australian, if you're any country around the world, this is impacting you. We have a major legislation that's coming out of the European Union, a directorate that is happening. It has started to be implemented and is going to be implemented against all corporations, large corporations that do business inside the EU and all their subsidiaries. So we're talking about Apple, McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, all that kind of stuff. All of these businesses and all the suppliers that they buy from are going to be impacted by some of these rules that are coming out. So you're going to want to pay attention to some of what's going on here. I don't necessarily have a lot of solutions for you at this point, but I do want to kind of get you informed on what is going on out there. All right, so what I'm talking about is the CSD3. The CSD3 just kind of went into effect. I believe it is starting to be stepped into. It's not going all in. It's a very large package of requirements, and it's focused in on corporations. The simplest form I saw was there's 8 steps, and the 8 steps aren't necessarily 8 policies, but rather they're 8 steps to all of the different policies that you're doing. It includes things like reporting and things that, so compliance, identification of compliance to a lot of these things. And like I said, this is not just for European corporations, but this is for US corporations, Canadian corporations, anyone who does business in the European Union, and anyone who basically is a supplier upstream or downstream of any of these businesses too. So when we start talking about Ford Motor and all of the companies that provide parts to Ford Motor, and we're talking about some pretty stiff penalties here. These corporations are going to be really pressed. They're either going to have to choose that they're going to either quit doing business in the EU, or they're going to have to comply with these things. Now, you may be all about all this stuff, and okay, but the compliance regulations alone are going to cost a lot of money. What kind of compliance stuff are we talking about? If you're familiar with the ESG, environmental, social governance, the idea that a ESG score is given to all corporations depending on how diverse the people in leadership are, how environmentally friendly they are, how proactive they are on pushing LGBTQ, how much they push other things. That's all part of the ESG score. Now, that's not necessarily called that in this thing, but the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the CSD3 or the CSDDD. This is what we're talking about. I have to give a hat tip to the Blaze out there who went into some of these regulations and such to kind of look at how this is going to impact people outside the European Union. But yeah, it is a doozy for major corporations. So just once again, just think through how many U.S. businesses are going to be impacted by this, how many Canadian businesses, how many Australian businesses. We're talking about anyone who does business internationally or who does business with corporations that do business internationally. And I don't know how far down the supply chain we're talking about here, but the corporations themselves have to implement policies for reporting, for review of how much in compliance they are, and then how they're going to correct those compliance issues. Now, that all sounds very, very boring and very much legalese and, oh, well, the lawyers and all those guys will handle it. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about massive regulatory requirements. So if you're a small business in Ohio that's making parts for McDonald's ice cream machines or something like that, or you're making lettuce that you're selling to McDonald's, or you're making a part for Ford Motor, or any of the other automotive companies out there. Perhaps your company is a railway company and you ship parts for these other companies. Perhaps that will land your company under these regulations. Your company now has to start reporting on what percentage of the corporate board are minorities, are women versus men. And that all has to get reported back to the company that's doing business in the European Union, or else that company is going to stop using your company as a supplier. If you don't comply with the reporting requirements, then they're going to find someone else who will comply with those reporting requirements. And guess who already is complying with these reporting requirements? European companies. So what we're seeing here is that the European Union is putting this massive, it's basically like a massive tariff. It's like a tariff that doesn't cost money, but it costs time and energy to make sure that European companies are primarily doing business with the European companies. That companies that are coming into the European Union to do business are going to be trying to do business with European companies in this way, so that they're already in compliance with this. The CSDD3, it's a big deal. It just started to come into force in July, and we're going to see a lot of this unfolding. We do have a couple other topics that we do want to cover while we're here at the European Union. They did just approve $11 billion in relief funds because we have terrible flooding across northern Italy, the Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Australia, Slovakia, and some other places too. There have been people who did not make it because of the flooding. No word yet on the impacts on agriculture at this point. I know that's a big point of our channel, that we talk a lot about what's happening with the agriculture out there. There is, honestly, they're dealing with the infrastructure issues. They're dealing with rescues of people out there. That's the main priority. They're starting to free up government funding. So we're talking about European Union funding going to the countries for the rescue efforts and for the rebuilding of infrastructure, bridges. A lot of residential houses have been damaged or destroyed in this, so housing. So they're all kind of focused in on that right now, not talking about the agricultural side of this, because once again, that is down the pipe. We'll start talking about that in the next couple weeks, but it's a very bad time, obviously. We've already gotten projections that are now a week old or so before the flooding. German wheat production is expected to be down by about 10% this year, which is a significant decline from what we've seen in previous years. Also France, and so when we start putting Germany and France together on wheat production, we're starting to talk about some major impacts on the wheat production overall. France has had excessive rainfall during the harvest season, and they're looking at actually having the smallest harvest since 1988. That's the projections that we're seeing right now. This is bad enough that we're talking about European wheat production down approximately 9% compared to last year. So a major impact on wheat production. Also, just so you know that last year wasn't too huge. Let's compare it to the 5-year average. We're looking at an 8% decline compared to the 5-year average. And once again, European wheat production is a very large portion of what's going on out there in the world. Of course, we're having issues over in China, India, with a lot of the grain production over there too. So we'll keep you up to date on that. We also seeing the economy starting to really start declining across Europe. Germany particularly slowing down significantly. Just in the last month, we've seen a 69% decrease in EV purchases, and not just EVs, but also 16.5% decrease in all new car registrations across Germany last month. So we're seeing that the Germans are buying a lot less cars right now. They're buying a lot less expensive EVs, but they're also buying less new cars in general. With that, that's giving us kind of an indication of what's going on with the European Union economy right now. Germany, for those of you not familiar, Germany generally makes up about 24% of the GDP of the EU. So with the German economy starting to slow down significantly, and we're seeing purchases and consumer activity dropping dramatically there, does give us an indication that things across the European Union are slowing down. So a lot of issues out there, and then of course the floods happening just couldn't happen at the worst time. There's never a good time for them, but we got that. We also have some of the countries starting to push back on asylum. We got Hungary, who has flaunted some of the rules and regulations that have been put on them from the EU. They've been hit with fines, and Hungary is just not going to pay them. Basically, they've just said they're not going to pay them. They're not going to pay the fines, and they're daring the EU to do something about it. That's kind of where that is. Netherlands and Hungary together actually petitioning to be removed from asylum requirements. So the asylum treaty parts that apply to them, they're wanting to pull out of that. They don't want to be part of it anymore. Obviously, we see other countries kind of moving that direction too. Sweden is trying to deport. Not deport, they're trying to bribe migrants to go home. So they're offering roughly about $34,000 US for migrant families to just leave. So that kind of, and they're out there celebrating the fact that they have negative net migration in Sweden now. So that's definitely, we see some countries really pushing it, and we see some other countries doing it more softly and trying to back off of it. Germany has started to, like they said, they're already actually starting to impose border restrictions, and they're basically just violating Schengen, just flat out. They want to start checking people's papers and passports at border entries, which is, like I said, in direct violation to the open borders policies of Schengen. So that is, they are having a strong reaction there. I know AfD has been drawing more strength as an alternative for Germany, Deutschland, right? So that's taking, that's they call far right or basically very anti-migration issues there. So the AfD is growing strength there in Germany, and Germany has really pivoted due to some recent incidents and a scandal that has come out about giving asylum to just basically any migrants that come into the country. If anyone comes into the country, they've been getting treated like a refugee. And that has really rubbed a lot of Germans the wrong way. That's why they're really starting to move towards closing their border. So what we're seeing is, after a long march of Europe marching together more and more, coming together into one big holistic union. Just a few years ago, they were talking about a European Union army. They were talking about really kind of moving the European Union in the way that the United States has gone, into more of almost like a country. And we're now seeing with England, the UK, pulling out of the EU. They've just quit. They fought for that for quite a long time before they were able to get out. And Nigel Farage, not only did he help pull them out of the EU, but now he is back into politics and trying to get his political party into power. That did not go well their last election cycle for them, but they did definitely present well compared to what people expected of them. So we got the UK pulling out. Now we're seeing fractures appearing across the EU where countries are like, I don't like this policy, I'm just not going to do it. And we have other countries starting to, like Hungary, saying, you fined us, but we're just not going to pay it. And there's a lot of challenges before the European Union right now. They are very much trying to present a unified front, but more and more they're having countries defecting from what's going on. And I know there's probably not as much pushback to the CSD3 here in the European Union. Most of the countries are kind of more or less on board with that. But the thing is that that's going to impact a lot of countries around the world. The question is are any major corporations around the world going to give legitimate pushback? And I told you that there is a major fine which is going to really coerce these companies to comply. So basically the fine is 5% of gross worldwide revenue. So McDonald's, if you're talking about 5% of all their worldwide sales, that's the fine that they could get if they do not comply with the CSD3. And that's definitely going to make them choose one of two options, really. Well, there's a third option too. The first option is they're going to comply. They may not like it, but they're going to comply to it. Number two is they're going to have to pull out of the EU completely. And now, if they pull out of the EU completely, they could potentially sell portions of the business. They could sell a franchise maybe to another corporation that will comply within the European Union. That's a possibility. The third option, though, is that they could comply and they could squawk. They could comply and follow the rules, but they could also just really protest heavily about it. I don't know if that really makes any difference, you know, whether you comply silently or comply loudly against it. But that's going to impact a lot of people, and expect a lot of corporations to be moving into compliance with that in the next number of weeks. Like I said, there's lots of trigger points to that as we go along. The first it started to go into effect in July. It's going to go into more effect as we go forward. Companies are going to have to be more and more compliance with it. And also the way it kind of works too is, like I said, you have to put in these processes so that even if you're not meeting the requirements as the European Union says are the requirements, you have to have these mechanisms so that you're becoming more in compliance with them. So even if, there's even the potential that they could just move the bar. They can move the bar, and then you need to start moving towards this new target of compliance on these things. And we're talking about carbon emissions, we're talking about green energy usage, we're talking about all these kinds of things. If you're some company out in the middle of like Ohio or Indiana or over on the left coast of the United States, you're going to have to go into compliance with all these different policies that were designed for European companies that may not make any sense whatsoever for you where you are. In fact, it may make a whole bunch of your employees decide to quit. That's also a possibility. What happens if you're in Romania? Well, I guess Romania is in the EU. Some country in Africa, right? What happens if you're in a Muslim country or something like that, and your suppliers are Muslim, and then they're forcing you to comply with all these LGBTQ things? Like, that's going to be a problem. So we're not seeing the pushback just yet from the corporate out there, but corporations are still trying to figure out what this actually means. But I promise you, it's going to impact every single American. It's going to impact pretty much most people around the entire world. This is a major power grab by the EU against basically every country out there. All right, friends, I wanted to bring that important one to you. Thanks to you guys who kind of pointed that out to me. Thanks to Blaze, kind of dug into the bill to kind of figure out what in the world this kind of means, and I just researched it out for myself a little bit more too. And I am in Brussels at the European Parliament. This is one of their buildings. Apparently they have another building too where they normally meet, but they do a lot of committee meetings and stuff like that here. See you guys later. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. You just can click right on the screen. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.